All right, friends. As offered at the outset of episode 82, rather, of the Spicer Speaking podcast, my guest this week, quarter century on college football sidelines, segueing that into a new gig as director of athletics at his alma mater, John Carroll University. Also, the author of the 2021 book, Coaching and Teaching Generation Z. His surname, synonymous with gridiron success. We'll get to that as well. Let's welcome Brian Polian to the Spicer Speaking podcast. Hello, Brian.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you allowing me to come on and visit a little bit.
I appreciate your time, man. And now, when we say that you are transitioning from the coaching sidelines and stops, by the way, which include not limited to a couple times at Notre Dame, Stanford, most recently at LSU, also head coach of the Nevada Wolfpack from 2013 to 2016. Transitioning to the new career, that is literal. That is literally happening right now in the midst of what I estimate to be about a 1,200-mile road trip from Baton Rouge to University Heights, Ohio. You did stop during this interview, but you are literally making this drive right now.
Yes, I am en route. I'm actually happy to be out of the car stretching my legs. I've been, crushing podcasts and making phone calls for about the last day and a half. So I'm excited to get out and stretch the legs and talk a little bit.
Well, as far as the podcast, I hope you saved the good stuff for me.
You got it.
Quarter century on the college football sidelines, Brian, and now deciding to move into, I think, what we could say an administrative role. What was the decision behind that for you?
It was driven in large part by family. I've got two children, a 14-year-old son, a 10-year-old daughter. My 14-year-old son, like a lot of children, has some challenges. And what my wife and I discovered was that the services and support he needed was not readily available for him in Louisiana. And I just kind of reached a point where, after 25 years of running and gunning and chasing jobs, that at some point as a parent, I certainly don't want to speak for anybody else, but I felt like it was my responsibility as a parent, where the choice that was better for my child was so clear that I had to make that choice. Now, the flip side of it is I'm going back to a place that I absolutely love. It's my alma mater. I'm embracing an opportunity to shift from leadership and coaching to leadership in administration. And who knows, this might lead to a whole second act in my career. But had you asked me 5 years ago, when you're 48 years old, are you going to be ready to walk away from coaching and lead an entire athletic department? I would have said to you, no, that's nuts. But here we are. You never know what the plan's going to be, and you just react to what you think is best.
Would it be safe to label this a non-traditional career move, going from an SEC sideline to leading a Division III sporting program?
I knew for sure I was going to get a lot of feedback that was, "Hey, are you nuts?" and there's been a fair share of that. But you'd be surprised at the amount of feedback that I've gotten from people that are like, "Hey, I think this is a great transition. You're going to be great at this job." And a lot of my peers, the John Carroll network is pretty unique. There's 40 some odd people working in the highest levels of the National Football League right now. Head coaches, general managers, coordinators. It's got a very unique story as it relates to the NFL. All of my peers that have reached out and said, "You know what? We understand why you're doing this. We get it. And we are just really thrilled that you're coming back to the alma mater." And that I knew I was doing the right thing, but that feedback made me feel really good. Like, okay, we're going back to a place where people want us.
I think whether it be from the vantage of fans, media members like myself, spectators, what have you, I mean, you in the 25 years had 9 different stops. Now, a couple of those stops were going back to places that you had already worked previously, if I have that correct.
That's correct.
But I think all that we kind of lose sight of that. We kind of lose sight of, guys always kind of looking for a better job or receiving a better job opportunity. And some of the collateral things that happen. You referenced your family, so much moving around, so many different cities and so many different homes. You and I are of a very similar age, along with the other things that you referenced. Did that just kind of catch up to you a little bit and you wanted to put a flag down?
Yeah, like it bothers me that when you ask my children where's their hometown, they can't give you one. Like my 14-year-old son's moved 6 times. He can tell you where he was born, but he can't tell you his hometown. Like I was really lucky. You referenced it a little bit in the intro. My dad, Bill Polian, is a Pro Football Hall of Famer and moved around a lot, but I was really lucky. Like I went through sixth grade through the end of high school in Buffalo, New York. So I call Buffalo, New York my hometown. It bothered me that my kids couldn't give you their hometown. And I'll share this one anecdote with you, and it might speak to some of your listeners.
Please.
My wife didn't know if a football was stuffed or inflated when we met. And so she really had to learn what this life was going to be like. And she had to accept that as part of, hey, this is just part of the package. If we're going to move together as a partnership, as a couple, you have to know that this is what it is. When I interviewed at Carroll and I came back to Louisiana, and it was like 1:30 in the morning, and I had been talking the whole day. I was exhausted. And I got back to the house and she was waiting up. And I told her, I'm like, Laura, I can't talk about this right now. And she said, you don't have to talk. You just have to listen. She said, for 20 years of our marriage, if you told me we need to do this, I was going. And for all intents and purposes, every step I made was a good one, right? Like my salary got better. It was a better job. And we moved all over the country. She said, after 20 years, this is the first time I'm telling you as your wife, we need to do this. We need to do this for our family. And that was probably the single most powerful conversation I had regarding this shift in my career was my wife telling me, hey, listen, we're going to take a big step back financially, but this is the right thing for our family. And we needed to do what's right for our family. And I was just struck by that.
You also referenced therein your dad, Bill Polian, the Hall of Fame accolade, six-time NFL Executive of the Year, only GM ever to take a team to 4 consecutive Super Bowls, got that Super Bowl ring eventually with the Indianapolis Colts. I want to say as both the GM and team president when they beat the Bears.
Yep.
Your dad, a lot of time in the NFL. You ample time in college football. Did you never want to work in the NFL, Brian?
I did not up until this point, because my fulfillment came from the impact on these lives of young people that we work with. I felt like I could make a difference with 18 to 22-year-olds. I enjoyed the recruiting part of it a great deal, was very good at it, and just was rewarded by the transformational nature of college athletics. I experienced that as a student athlete at John Carroll. I wanted to share that. I wanted to be the coach in a player's life that made a difference the way that coaches made a difference in my life. Now, am I sad to be leaving Division 1A as it is right now? It has changed a lot in the last little bit, and it has become far more transactional. So in the last couple of years, as name, image, and likeness and the portal and all these shifts were occurring, I began to think to myself, well, if we're going to pay these guys, which in theory, I actually don't have a problem with, we need to get a better handle on it. But if we're going to pay these guys, then maybe it's time to start looking at the NFL. Again, this opportunity at John Carroll just kind of popped out of nowhere. But it wasn't until the last year or so that I began thinking, you know what, maybe it's time to transition to the National Football League, where we have contracts and we have a salary cap and we have a little bit more structures compared to what exists right now in college football.
certainly want to get back to NIL. Let me reference one other thing first, Brian. You noted your success as a recruiter. In reading about you, that's something that came up in basically every article. All your success in that aspect. In the short time we've been visiting, can already tell that you're well spoken, uh, personable, thoughtful individual. Let me put it. I'll let you put it in your own words about why were you a good recruiter? Kind of take the listeners inside potential recruits' living room for all those years and bring in a kid, whether it be to LSU or Notre Dame or Stanford or Nevada. Why were you good at that?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think first of all, I'm really comfortable in my own skin. Like I know who I am. And sometimes an 18-year-old African American young man like might look at me and say, well, I mean, he's a dork, but
Who's this
that's okay.
47-year-old white guy?
Yeah, but
That's
that's okay because I'm not trying to fool anybody. And I think ultimately young people want authenticity more than they want you to try and be their friend. Like I would laugh all the time with Major Burns, the safety at LSU. The music would be playing pre-practice and I wouldn't know anybody. Like who's NBA young boy? Who's Lil Boozy? Like I didn't know these things, but I think what Major appreciated was that I didn't try to pretend to know these things. Like, okay, this is what you guys are interested in. Tell me about it. But I wasn't going to try to fake it. Like the amount of coaches that, you know, their accents change depending on the recruit that they're talking to. Is this guy in the deep South? There's this guy in like, I always knew who I was and I'm comfortable in my own skin. And so I think people appreciated that. The other thing was I just, when we recruit to a job, when we recruit to a university, I think we often come in and it's like, okay, here's my sales pitch, and I'm going to hit you over the head with it, as opposed to opening the conversation with what's important to you? What is it that you're looking for? I want to ask more questions and learn about you. And then if I felt like our university, our program, our head coach matched what you were looking for, then I kind of articulated that vision as opposed to I'm going to sit you down and I'm just going to beat you over the head with a sales pitch. And I like the relationship part of it. I had never had problems texting and calling guys and, you know, being interested in their lives. I think that that's the joy of the job. So I think those kind of all factored into being a good recruiter. In the end, the guy that made my career was Manti Te'o,
Hmm.
because I went recruiting Manti to go from Hawaii to Notre Dame. I went from being Bill Polian's son to Brian Polian, the guy that got the #1 defensive player in the country, to go to Notre Dame. I will be forever indebted to Manti. But the only reason I ended up recruiting him is because I was like 32 years old and Charlie Weiss was like, all right, well, this guy's like a golden retriever. He'll do anything. So let's just send him out to the West Coast and to where we're not supposed to get players. And we ended up getting a bunch of great players. And I didn't know any better. I was like, all right, I'll go work really hard at this and see what happens.
Friends, you're tuning into episode 82 of the Spicer Speaking podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Judd Spicer. Brian Polian, the new director of athletics at John Carroll University, is my guest, speaking to us en route from his previous life and previous gig in Baton Rouge as he's traveling to University Heights, Ohio. Brian referenced NIL, name, image, likeness. And it's confusing, it's complicated. It oftentimes feels to me when I read articles about kids transferring for these pretty substantial dollar figures that it's the Wild West. In some instances, it's also hilarious when you see a college guy getting a few $1,000 to do a quirky commercial, a local commercial for like an air conditioning company. So it's kind of all over the board. Were you, I don't know, struggling might be the wrong word, but in your dealing with NIL and how it has come on the college landscape, was it something that you already said you're okay with the kids getting dollars and you and I are in concert on that, but were there struggles in how much money was going around and what the rules were and how to kind of move forward with both recruiting kids and keeping kids in that realm?
Yes. So first of all, it's very important to me that I say on record, fundamentally, I believe that these players at the highest levels that generate the revenue, the TV revenue, and what coaches get paid, there's no way you can simply justify anymore that the scholarship's enough. It's not, it used to be maybe 10, 12 years ago, graduating from college debt free was meaningful. But with the type of money that we're generating right now in major college athletics, the players deserve something. They absolutely, because they're the labor force. So, and I don't want people to think I'm being hypocritical about it, because for a lot of years I made really, really good money coaching these guys. But there is absolutely no structure right now. And there are supposedly rules involved, but I've yet to see them be enforced. They vary from state to state. State legislatures are not dumb. I mean, Alabama changed their state law about NIL, I think within 16 months, because they figured out quickly the way the NCAA had set it up, their state law actually put them at a disadvantage compared to the competition. Yeah. So they switched it back. So like, there's no structure to this right now. And it's very difficult to navigate. I was at Texas A&M when Johnny Manziel went from an unknown redshirt freshman to winning the Heisman Trophy. Johnny should have been allowed the opportunity to sign at a card show for whatever the market rate was. Yeah. Johnny should have earned some percentage off of the jerseys that were being sold that didn't have his name on it, but had his number. Everybody knew why they were selling those jerseys. But what's going on right now is almost on the far edges of the extreme, that it's like, all right, you can't justify 6 figures to a high school prospect who has never played a single down, high 6 figures, by the way, who's never played a single down of college football. The other unintended consequence was the transfer portal and the weaponization by the players. And by the way, I don't blame the players. This is the system that is in place. But let's talk on record about a guy who's actually said, like, basketball player from Michigan. I believe his name's Hunter Dickinson. Yep. Dickerson. If I get the name wrong, I apologize. He's a really well-regarded Big Ten basketball player. He puts himself in the transfer portal, picks another institution, and when asked why, I said, listen, I was doing less than 6 figures a year at Michigan. Like, there's money to be made here. Yeah. There are players that go to their head coaches and say, listen, I'm in the portal, and if you can make my deal better, I'll come back. But if you don't, I'm going on the open market. Even in the National Football League, you got to be in the league 3 or 4 years before you become a free agent. And coaches and GMs can build rosters knowing, okay, a year from now, this guy's going to hit the open market. We probably need to replace him. In college right now, you wake up and you don't know who you're going to have to replace on your roster until the end of the day. Like, you're just hoping to make it to the end of the transfer portal cycle to figure out what's happened. And by the way, if you're a group of 5 head coach right now, good luck. Good luck, because if you identify undervalued talent and you develop it, all you're doing is getting a guy ready to play for the next program. So this whole atmosphere right now is chaotic. I would say unhealthy, but people might disagree with me. But it's a difficult world to live in right now in Power 5, football, basketball. I mean, we see it happening in softball. We're seeing it women's basketball. I mean, it's not just a men's thing. I mean, it's happening all over the landscape, and it's chaotic right now. There's no doubt.
Added to the NIL, added to the transfer portal that you referenced. It's just a lot different world, man. Again, you and I are almost identical in age. We went to college about the same years. We've also got legalized sports gambling in some form in over 30 states.
Yeah.
We've got legalized medical or recreational cannabis in nearly 40 states. And hey, if I was, a college athlete when all this stuff was legal and I could make this kind of money, I mean, devices, for a kid, it'd be tough to ignore all that stuff, all that noise. I'm not even mentioning anything with the cell phones right now, but it's just such a different world than when you or I in college, man. I mean, for you to navigate that as a coach had to become just increasingly difficult. All that stimuli.
The betting stuff is unbelievable to me. Like, people are shocked. We're shocked that we're having problems right now. I mean, we're giving these kids money. You can bet on your phone. It's legal everywhere. And now we're shocked that college kids, student athletes, shouldn't bet. I mean, we're shocked that these things are occurring. It's insane to me that people are surprised that these issues are popping up. And we're also dealing with a generation that lives on their phone, that their self-esteem in large part is drawn from what they read about themselves, whether it be through the media or through peers who post. And it's a really, really challenging time. And I don't envy the folks that, look, when you're a college football coach, your livelihood is in the hands of an 18 to 23-year-old. Your family's future is in the hands of in some cases a child or a young adult, and that's a scary proposition sometimes, and it's getting scarier.
Should have had that. New York Times put out a good article on sports gambling in recent days. Obviously, the participating states are basically pound for pound all enjoying massive tax windfalls, but there are already some states recognizing the problem. Shocker, like you said, that's
Yeah.
come with sports gambling, and starting to limit the way that the companies are advertising, and specifically on college campuses. So while there's a ton of money already being made, there is some pretty quick step back from respective states and state legislatures trying to limit how people can gamble and where the advertisements are coming from. A couple more for you today, Brian. In your book that you put out in 2021, Coaching and Teaching Generation Z, seems germane to what I just asked. Does it reference some of these things, some of these challenges, and some of the communication it sounds like that you successfully enjoyed with the current crop of college athletes?
Yeah, it does. It does in large part talks about how different Generation Z is to the groups before them. And certainly in the time that I played high school and college athletics, it wasn't unusual to get cussed out by a coach. It wasn't unusual, for that matter, for somebody to grab a face mask or, hey, get you over in that gap and give you a pop on the tail and move you over. And just how different this group is. And their generation of coaches that were my age, that are kind of between 45 and 55, that every year I would see guys getting into trouble and losing jobs, and sometimes very publicly, because they were not adjusting to the new social norms, and they were not adjusting to Generation Z and how they wanted to be taught and how they wanted to be interacted with. And I just kind of felt like it was worthy of diving in on. And the pandemic helped me because I had a lot of time. I mean, this whole thing started as a clinic talk that I would give to high school coaches, but it ended up being a book because the pandemic hit, and my dad told me, hey, listen, man, you better figure out something to do here because we're not going anywhere for a while. So, and then as I did a deeper dive, you begin to understand very basic things. Like, this group is 100% relationship driven. If you don't work really hard to build connections with them, you are not going to effectively teach, instruct, coach. It's just, and there was that old thing, well, they don't care about what you know until they know that you care. I had coaches that I didn't have strong ties with, but if the guy told me to do XYZ, I was going to do it because I was raised that whatever the coach said, you had to do.
Yeah.
It's different now. Like, the most effective coaches are the ones that go out of their way to build personal connections with their players, and not just the good ones, all of them. This group communicates in a way that you and I would have thought completely foreign. You can have a really meaningful conversation via text with somebody from Gen Z, to the point where I experienced at Nevada. I had young people on my team that I could get more from communicating through the phone than I would if he was sitting right in front of me, looking down at his feet, shuffling, uncomfortable. Like my dad taught me, hey, listen, if you have to have a serious conversation with somebody, you're going to do it in person and you're going to look them in the eye. That is completely different with Gen Z. Like you can build bonds through DMs and text messages, which I think is really unique. Gen Z wants, as a coach, they want individualized teaching. I remember I worked with a DB coach who was like, okay, on Tuesdays I do these drills because it's man day. On Wednesdays I do these drills because it's zone day. On Thursdays I do these drills because we're in the red zone. Like, no, these kids want to know, here's what you do well. Here's what you as an individual need to work on. And here are the things that I'm going to do individually to make you better. And it goes back, if you let me finish this thought, I see.
Please.
This is, I think, something people are afraid to do in recruiting. All we do is tell them how great they are. Matt House, the defense coordinator at LSU, is unbelievable. When he has a high-level prospect in, like we all watch the highlight tapes, he creates a corrections tape. Here are the things that I see that you need to improve upon. And now let me show you the drill that I do to correct this. And let me show you video of my guys doing that at a high level. Here's how I'm going to make you a better player. We're afraid to tell these kids, you don't do X, Y, and Z well, because we're afraid they're going to be turned off.
In my own observations, and oftentimes I guess I'll relate to the golf industry out here in the desert, which is massive. It's a $1 billion annual industry, and chat with folks a lot that run clubs and courses out here. And, they tell me how this generation is not want to go to a job and stick there for a long time. In my own observations, Brian, I would say this generation is more sensitive, but also smarter than we probably were. Some of these kids and young people I've spoken with, they impress me how knowledgeable they are about the world, but also a little more sensitive. I mean, if you agree with that assessment, it seems for you that you haven't got stuck on those things. You haven't looked at them as slights, but just realized that you want to connect and have communication with these younger people, that you need to adapt.
I think what you referenced something really unique and not a lot of people recognize. This generation has got more information at their fingertips than any generation in the history of humanity. The long snapper doesn't need me to teach him how to long snap. He can go to YouTube and pull up one of 100 videos that can teach him how to long snap. What he needs me for is to get to know him as a person, what motivates him, to observe him daily and figure out what he needs to do better. Like, that's coaches, leaders, bosses. We are relationship drivers right now. We are in the people business, because the teaching now it still occurs to a degree, but listen, they can learn the basics of anything on their phone. So we need to be in the business of driving them as people. And I think that has been the major change, the major shift that's occurred. For me, it was recognition of, if I don't adjust, I'm going to be a dinosaur, and I'm going to be out professionally. But more importantly, it was, if I'm fulfilled by impacting their lives and helping them become better people and having them beyond athletics, then I need to adjust who I am as a teacher and as a leader. And that's what drove me.
One more for you today, Brian. If you and I were to enjoy another chat, say a year from now, and you were to, I guess, pick one thing in your first year as a director of athletics at John Carroll University that you'd accomplished, whether it be on the field or off the field, again, a year from now, what might that one thing be?
This might catch you off guard. I am really excited to be a driver of women's athletics. I think
Okay.
people just look at me and say he's a football guy, he's a career football guy. Uh, I think people assume that you're kind of a rockhead coach, and um, I have a 10-year-old daughter that loves to play basketball. I can't wait to bring her to Coach Beth's practice at John Carroll and let her hang out and see that if you want to play at a high level or you want to coach at a high level, you can achieve this if you want, and it's important and people care about it. And so there's going to be a lot of learning for me in year one. I'm not a career administrator. I'm hoping not to make any major mistakes. My goal is to learn the lay of the land, figure out where our true challenges lie, help us organizationally. But I'm really excited to be a driver of women's athletics at the collegiate level, and not only the student athletes and our coaches, but in terms of the staff that I'm going to hire in the department.
From the women's athletics to the men's athletics at John Carroll to your family's finding a new home at University of Heights, Ohio. Wish you all the success in your new gig, man. I'll let you get back to the dusty trail, finish out your drive.
Yeah.
Brian Polian, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to be here.